Welcome to another edition of the SovereignBTC podcast. This will be the third edition of the program. It's your guide to the practical side of everyday Bitcoin use. We're bringing you news, views, tips, and tools you can use to utilize Bitcoin to benefit your life. My name's John Bush, and we have a great program lined up for you today. It's jam-packed with info and all sorts of great interviews. I'm recording this right here live from Freedom Summit 2014 in Phoenix, Arizona. My family and I had the pleasure of driving out here. Actually, the drive wasn't very pleasurable, and we got held up at a border checkpoint because we often don't like to voluntarily comply with what we see as arbitrary government edicts. We wanted to set a good example for our kiddos, so long story short, we ended up at the border checkpoint for about an hour, but we didn't willingly submit to their questions, and I hope we set a good example for our kiddos. But here we are nonetheless at Freedom Summit 2014, and we're going to be doing some interviews with some of the speakers here. This week we'll be featuring an interview that I did with Drew Phillips, Davi Barker, and MK Lords of Bitcoin Not Bombs. That's bitcoinnotbombs.com. It's an organization extolling the benefit of keeping Bitcoin unregulated, encouraging people to use Bitcoins instead of dollars because the dollar in turn gives value to the central banking Federal Reserve System, which in turn prints money out of thin air to fund foreign wars of aggression. We chat with them about that as well as the state of Bitcoin use in the philanthropic world and talk about some of the projects that they've done. That's coming up. We're going to try to sit down with Cody Wilson, and the CEO of Overstock.com is here as well. We're going to try to get some interviews with them. We'll be playing those hopefully on next week's podcast. We'll also be bringing you an excerpt from an interview that my lovely wife, Catherine Bleish, did for her podcast, The BitMom. She's doing a podcast series on women in Bitcoin, and she sat down recently with Dr. Stephanie Murphy of Let's Talk Bitcoin, Free Talk Live, and Free Aid. She's got a whole lot of great projects. She's doing a lot of good stuff, and she's a wonderful thinker and doer in the Bitcoin space. We're going to share that podcast. The website is thebitmom.com for y'all to check that out. We also give you the Bitcoin tip of the week. This one's about using a mixing service to ensure your Bitcoin transactions are private. We also have the Bitcoin quote of the week. This week is about the Mt. Gox problem, which I'm sure most people have heard about and are dealing with the headaches surrounding that. And we'll be bringing you our featured interview of the week with Stephen Wilkinson. He is with the Texas Bitcoin Association with austinbitcoin.com. And we're going to chat with him about BitPay and how businesses can utilize this service in order to accept Bitcoin and in order to benefit their bottom line. There's a lot of great information we share, especially if you're a small business owner or a merchant. You're not going to want to miss this interview. Before we move on, I want to congratulate Bitcoin. They were recently awarded the Best Technology Achievement for 2013. This was at the 2013 Crunchies, took place in San Francisco. The event was put together by TechCrunch, GigaOM, and VentureBeat. So congratulations, Bitcoin. You're growing by leaps and bounds. We're proud to be a part of the Bitcoin ecosystem, and we're happy to bring you this third edition of SovereignBTC, your guide to the practical side of everyday Bitcoin use. You can check us out at SovereignBTC.com. You can find the podcast at SovereignBTC.com/podcast. You can also find us on Let'sTalkBitcoin.com. Again, I want to give a big shout out to Let's Talk Bitcoin for including us in their new upcoming Let's Talk Bitcoin network, the LTB network, as they're calling it. You can also find us on Twitter at twitter.com/SovBTC or on Facebook at facebook.com/SovereignBTC. We're going to go ahead and start the program off with an excerpt from the BitMom interview with Dr. Stephanie Murphy. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome everyone to the bitmom.com podcast series on women in Bitcoin. Today we will be talking with Dr. Stephanie Murphy, a well-known radio host from the free state of New Hampshire. Stephanie Murphy is the host of Pork Therapy. She also is a host on the Let's Talk Bitcoin show and a Sunday night host for Free Talk Live. She is the director of operations for Free Aid, a nonprofit that I have utilized in the past at a awesome camping festival in New Hampshire called Porcupine Freedom Festival. I had to get a Band-Aid a couple times. So thank you, Stephanie, for the Band-Aid. I really appreciate it, and welcome to the show.
Oh, you're so welcome, Kat. It's great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
I am very excited today. This podcast series is designed to highlight the human side of Bitcoin and the feminine side of Bitcoin. So we're less interested in tech talk, and we are more interested in learning about you so we can inspire other women to take the Bitcoin leap. So if you wouldn't mind, I would like to start out asking, who are you, Stephanie? What are you interested in? Where do you come from? Who is Stephanie Murphy?
Well, I really love Bitcoin. To keep with the theme of this show, I just think Bitcoin is such a cool technology for increasing human freedom. And that's why I'm so interested in it. I've been a long-time libertarian, you could say I was born one, right? Everybody's born an anarchist.
Amen to that.
It just kind of gets taken away from them as they grow up. But I've been into liberty for a long time. And so, of course, when I heard about Bitcoin, I was really excited about it. I first heard about Bitcoin in 2011. And at the time, I was actually working as a research scientist. You introduced me as Dr. Stephanie Murphy. I have a PhD in biochemistry, but that's not what I do anymore. But at the time when I heard about Bitcoin, I was working as a scientist, and I thought, wow, this is so cool. I was kind of dabbling in a second career at the time in radio and podcasting, and I was thinking about making a career change, which I later did. And so I found out about Bitcoin, and I thought, wow, this could be the key to sort of enabling me to work for myself and to have more control over my finances, and also to just give people more freedom in different parts of the world where perhaps government is inflating or stealing their money, or they just don't want to use their local fiat currency for whatever reason.
That's awesome.
So that really excited me.
So where did you hear about it? Was it a blog post? Was it a speech? Where was it that you heard about it?
I heard about it on Free Talk Live, and Free Talk Live is a radio show that I'm a host of on Sunday nights. And Free Talk Live was actually contacted by Gavin Andreessen, who's now the lead developer of Bitcoin. And at the time, this was back in the days when you could buy 10,000 Bitcoins for $50, which Gavin actually did when he started the Bitcoin faucet.
Good for him.
And, he was giving away 5 Bitcoins for free to anyone who visited this website and made a Bitcoin address and put it in there. That was the Bitcoin faucet. So at the time, he was really interested in spreading the word about Bitcoin because he had got the Bitcoin bug and was excited about it. So at some point, he told Ian and Mark from Free Talk Live, they're the main hosts, and they started talking about it on Free Talk Live. And at the time, I was just kind of joining the team as a host, and Roger Ver, who very generously donated some Casacious physical Bitcoin to all the hosts of Free Talk Live as sort of a token of his appreciation for the show.
Wow.
And so that was how I got my first Bitcoins, because I was a host, and I got a Casacious coin from Roger.
What a cool story.
Yeah, I love the story because it really shows something that I think is so important, which is that, you can lecture someone about Bitcoin for hours on end, and maybe they will get it and maybe they won't. Or you can just show them, how to install a wallet app on their smartphone and send them $1 worth of Bitcoins, and you have a devotee for life. That's how people get excited about Bitcoin, is actually using it hands-on, and that was definitely what happened to me.
Oh, that's awesome. I think in my experience, I have seen once our family helps other people start their first wallet and get their first Bitcoin or fraction of a Bitcoin. Not like we're giving away full Bitcoins right now, but we do give away fractions just because we feel the same way, that when you show people how to do it and you put some in their hands, all of a sudden they get the bug. They get bit by the Bitcoin bug. And I know you've been bit. I've been bit. We love Bitcoin.
Yeah, whenever I go somewhere and there are people who are maybe a little unfamiliar with Bitcoin, or, maybe they've heard about it, but they have never really used it, I always make it a point to, just give them a little bit of Bitcoin. I always have some on my smartphone, and I always help them install a wallet and give them their first Bitcoin, and they remember it. They really appreciate it. And I'll do this for anybody, man, woman, anybody, any gender, but I especially like to do this for women because they may not, people may not talk to them about Bitcoin. And so I just want to increase the amount of Bitcoin users in general, but especially women because they are kind of underrepresented. So I do my best to talk to women about Bitcoin, as though they are people, which they totally are.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's interesting to me that there are so many males into Bitcoin and so few females, even within our movement, our liberty movement that you and I both sort of roll with. There already is a male dominance in the, liberty movement itself. But then I found with Bitcoin, there's even fewer female. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that. Why is Bitcoin so male heavy?
That's a great question. I think the answer is going to be, complicated like anything else. I don't think that there's anything genetic or biological about women that makes them less able to understand Bitcoin or less interested in Bitcoin. I think women are just people, like I love to say. And, perhaps there is kind of a cultural thing where, males might be a little more confident asking questions or speaking up when they don't understand something, whereas women may kind of tend to be a little shyer and hang back and just see if anybody answers their question. And Bitcoin is totally like that, where if you're a new user, you're probably going to have a lot of questions, and you might be worried that some of them sound like they're dumb questions or something like that. So whenever I talk about Bitcoin, I try to be just super inclusive and anticipate what people's questions might be, but always be open to hearing whatever they're curious about and asking them what their concerns are. Bitcoin is an intersection between tech and finance, and those fields are already male-dominated both, and libertarianism, you could argue, and that's a male-dominated kind of sphere. So when you put those all together, you kind of have this perfect storm where you get a room full of dudes with not a woman in sight. And I don't think it has to be that way. There's nothing about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is totally neutral. It doesn't care if you're a drug dealer. It doesn't care if you're a grandmother who's making an investment and you call Bitcoin blow stance, like that famous Reddit post, right? It doesn't care who you are. It's completely neutral with respect to the users. And so, it should be gender neutral too, or we should remember that it's gender neutral too. You don't have to be a male to use Bitcoin. And in fact, I think Bitcoin offers a lot to women, especially in parts of the world where perhaps women don't have access to credit or to bank accounts. I've done research on micro-lending, quite a bit actually, because I've spoken about micro-lending and microfinance in the past. And something like 98% of the borrowers of Grameen Bank, which was the first basically micro-lending organization, 98% of their borrowers were women and still are.
Wow.
So, there's a tremendous potential around the world for women to be empowered basically through the ability to start their own businesses and to have control over their own finances. And really all they need is, you don't even need a smartphone. You can use a dumb phone, In Africa, there's this payment system called M-Pesa, which everybody uses, and you can send payments over SMS. And, they're going to have Bitcoin integration for that. You can already send Bitcoins through SMS by Coinapulse, which is Eric Voorhees' company. So there are lots of ways that we could really leverage Bitcoin in the developing world for the success and empowerment of not just women, but everybody.
Wow. I actually have never thought about that. It never crossed my mind. I'm sitting here doing research on all these fabulous women who are in Bitcoin because I'm wanting to empower other women to be involved as well. And it never crossed my mind the applications in the third world, especially with the amount of women in the third world who are now empowered to step up and start their own businesses. Wow, what a fascinating way to do it through Bitcoin, an international currency. Then they're not pegged to the dollar. They're not pegged to whatever currency it is that's available in their country. It's an international currency, and they could literally become international business owners overnight.
Yeah, and not only that, but people in other places are empowered to lend to those people as well, because there are 69 countries on Earth that are not served by PayPal. So if you're in the U.S., you cannot use PayPal to send payments to Egypt, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, a lot of different places around the world. And those are completely for political reasons. And so you say, okay, well, what if I can't send a payment to one of those countries by PayPal, to somebody in one of those countries by PayPal, what do I do? Okay, let's look at Western Union. Well, Western Union, if you send $100 by Western Union from the U.S. to Egypt, let's say, they take anywhere between $7 to $18 in fees out of that $100. So that's a ridiculous portion of the money that you're sending. You know, you're paying almost a 20% fee to send that money. And there's got to be a better way. In a world where we can send an email anywhere in the world and it'll show up within a few minutes, can't we do better with money, you know, with sending payments? And with Bitcoin, we absolutely can. The fees are going to be minuscule. You can send any, you know, tiny amount. You can send $1 to somebody in India. You can do micro lending with Bitcoin and have it financed by multiple lenders all around the world. And you can even do this privately if you don't want anybody to know, for instance, that you're financing microloans. I don't know why you wouldn't, but, you know, people like their privacy and they should be able to have it. Sure. So there's just so much you can do with Bitcoin.
Man, that was a great interview. Really excited about the work that Stephanie Murphy's doing, and I think she has a great ability to explain the real benefits, the practical benefits of Bitcoin. The sky is the limit. I hope you enjoyed the BitMom podcast. You can find more interviews at thebitmom.com. We'll be featuring some of them regularly here on the Sovereign BTC podcast. And again, what Catherine's trying to do is provide a human side for Bitcoin and highlight what the women in Bitcoin are doing. Oftentimes, if you've been to any of these Bitcoin meetups or conferences, or if you belong to the Liberty community, you find that it's very male heavy. She wants to highlight the good work that the women are doing and also encourage more women to get involved. Some women may be a little standoffish or turned off by the fact that it's so male-dominated. There's even been some stories I saw on Reddit of a woman, I think it was a Florida Bitcoin meetup, who got real uncomfortable with the way some of the men treated her. So we're trying to do what we can here on Sovereign BTC, and my lovely wife is doing what she can with the BitMom podcast to try to invite women in and let them know that they're welcome and they have a place here in the Bitcoin ecosystem. All right, before we move on any further, we're going to hit you with this week's Bitcoin Tip of the Week, sponsored by blockchain.info. This one's all about mixing services, which I think is a wonderful tool people can use. Of course, some people believe Bitcoin's anonymous. It's not really 100% anonymous, especially when you consider what the NSA can do. But nonetheless, utilizing a mixing service will help you to maintain more privacy than not utilizing a mixing service. And blockchain.info has a couple of their own to choose from. So without further ado, here's this week's Bitcoin Tip of the Week.
Are you concerned about privacy? To make your Bitcoin transactions virtually untraceable, you can use a mixing service. These services work by combining multiple transactions into one so that addresses from many different sources are temporarily combined. Upon review of a mixed transaction, it is nearly impossible to trace your Bitcoin address of origin. This means your transaction will remain private. There is often a small fee for these services, as well as minimum and maximum amounts of Bitcoins you can send. Blockchain.info has its own mixing service called Shared Send and currently also offers Shared Coin free of charge. This week's Bitcoin Tip of the Week was brought to you by Blockchain.info, the world's most popular Bitcoin wallet. Simple and secure, blockchain is the easiest way to get started using Bitcoin. To learn more or to create a wallet today, visit Blockchain.info.
As I said before, we're recording here live at Freedom Summit 2014. I want to give a big shout out to Ernest Hancock and all the people at freedomsphoenix.com. My family's out here. We're going to be screening Sovereign Living, the reality show. You can check out episode 1 at sovereignliving.tv. It's a program that follows my family in our quest to become self-sufficient and lead a voluntary natural life. And coming up on February 21st, we're going to be up in New Hampshire. I'm flying solo, actually. I'll be there to screen the premiere of Episode 4. Now, Episode 4 is totally germane to the Bitcoin world because it's all about alternative currencies. Last June, we flew out to the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which is a project of the Free State Project, and we learned all about Bitcoin. We got set up with the Bitcoin wallet. We sat down with Eric Voorhees to chat about Bitcoin. We chatted with Dr. Robert Murphy. He's with the Austrian Economic School to chat about what value really means. We sat down with Drew Phillips, whom is also part of Bitcoin Not Bombs, and we're going to play an interview right now that I did with Drew Phillips, Davi Barker, and MK Lords, all part of the Bitcoin Not Bombs crew. They're doing a lot of great work, and I really appreciate how they're encouraging nonprofits to adopt Bitcoin. I think there's so many uses and benefits for Bitcoin in the nonprofit world, and we chatted about that. We chatted about Bitcoin regulation, and we chatted about more of the great work they're doing at Bitcoin Not Bombs. Enjoy the interview. We're here at Freedom Summit 2014, and I'm joined with the Bitcoin Not Bombs crew. We got Drew Phillips, Davi Barker, and MK Lords. How y'all doing today?
Pretty good.
Doing great.
Very
good. Excellent. I'm doing great too. So Bitcoin Not Bombs, I think the name of the organization or movement, I don't know what you want to call it. The meme, there you go. It says a lot about the philosophy of the group, Bitcoin Not Bombs, which my understanding is, we prefer Bitcoins over Federal Reserve notes or any other central currency because those central bank institutions, not only do they have a medium of exchange, a coerced medium of exchange, but they also are utilized to fund major foreign wars of aggression. So maybe we can just start by talking a little bit more about that philosophy. What does Bitcoin Not Bombs mean to you, Drew?
To back up the story, it started with antiwar.com. It was sort of a natural marketing campaign for their adoption of Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
It's just sort of a slogan that we came up with, and then that snowballed into a domain name, into a blog, into some of the other projects that we've worked on. But yeah, that was the comparison that we were making. That this is the great thing about this currency, is we can use a currency and we can not support a system of coercion, taxation, warfare, and these are the things about Bitcoin that attract us to this currency, and why we want to help people adopt it and use it, and why we think it's or at least why I think it's a wonderful invention for the world.
Right on. Is that why you got into Bitcoin too, Davi?
I've been into alternative currencies themselves for a lot longer than I've been into Bitcoin. I first got into alternative currencies when I realized that the dollar was a lie, and I was very upset about being lied to.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose that the reason that I first sort of took an interest in Bitcoin was because I saw this sort of wave of adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And that made it more viable. Like silver has been struggling to be this alternative currency for a long time, and it has some limitations that have made that kind of adoption very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And Bitcoin overcomes a lot of those limitations. But fundamentally, the reason I'm interested in any alternative currency is because I think of the dollar as a kind of a war bond. Like using it and holding it is a way of sustaining the system where they're able to fund warfare without they don't actually tax us anymore. They just print this money.
Sure.
So the participation in that system sort of prolongs their ability to print money, which prolongs their ability to wage war. And so you're sort of supporting it by using it.
That's right. Yeah, and if fewer people used it, or if people stopped using it altogether, then they wouldn't be able to print the money to fund the wars. What about you, Megan? How did you get into Bitcoin?
Well, I kind of come from the alternative currency side of things too, more so with gold and silver. I work at Roberts & Roberts, so we were all about getting people to use silver as opposed to the dollars, and I started doing more research into Bitcoin, and it's even easier to use than silver, and I think it is very much the future of money, and when you choose to use that over the dollars, you're casting a vote against the empire. A phrase I started using the term blood dollars to describe the dollar. Because that's very much what it's backed by. It's backed by death and destruction. And with Bitcoin, you have a way to opt out of that system. You have a way to say, I no longer support this, and I'm going to make meaningful, changes to, get into Bitcoin and kind of oppose that. And the first interview I did for Bitcoin Not Bombs was with Jason King of Sean's Outpost. I ended up getting involved with them. They're a homeless outreach in Pensacola, Florida, where I'm from. And just seeing Bitcoin being able to use, directly to help people, I think is what really got me, more so on the bandwagon. I was already kind of involved with Bitcoin, but just seeing, how you're cutting out the middleman. When you want to help people, you can do it directly with Bitcoin. You don't need to, go through some middleman that may take a part of that money or, whatever kind of support you want to give that person. You don't know what's going to happen to it. You don't have to trust that this third party is going to be ethical. You can just directly help people. So that really appeals to me with Bitcoin. Crossing over borders, being able to directly help people in countries that need it the most. And because obviously, one thing we export a lot of is war. So, Bitcoin is a way to go around that and get these people support that they need, because these populations in other countries, they're not pro-war. It's their governments that are pro-war. It's their governments that control their money too.
Yep. Yep.
So Bitcoin is a way out of that.
Excellent. Now, Bitcoin originally positioned itself, well, nobody positioned it, but it's positioned outside of the state influence, and that's one of the many values of it in most people's eyes. But now we see a large sector of the Bitcoin community wanting to pull Bitcoin into the state's purview, into the state's influence through regulation. And obviously the state's going to want to regulate it in large part to prevent competition with the existing monopolies, the banking institutions, the credit card institutions, their own central banks. But it kind of pains me to see people within the Bitcoin community trying to opt for regulation. What position does Bitcoin Not Bombs take on this this dichotomy we see?
Well, just to try to answer that, I guess it's a chicken and egg sort of problem. We want to see adoption, we want to see widespread use. You want more people to be able to access Bitcoin, and for that to happen, you need services that will play by the rules and be above board. And that's good and bad. That makes it easier to get Bitcoin. Allows people to link their banks and do these types of things to get Bitcoin, and that spreads adoption and use. Mm-hmm. But then you're sort of slowly creeping back into that system of taxation and regulation and keeping tabs on how much you bought and how much you sold and, mm-hmm. and what you should pay and this and that and the other. So it's definitely a double-edged sword, and I like to be a purist, but I have to be realistic. I do things every day that should be filed on my W-9 or whatever, and that's the world we live in, and I'd rather not, and I try to find ways to avoid all that stuff, but it's unavoidable in my day-to-day life. But if we want Bitcoin to take off more, there's some of that has to happen, but how much of it do I have to participate in, and how much can I avoid that by further research of how to use Bitcoin, how to use it more anonymously and things like that. So it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that I think people have to take on and learn to find these alternative ways to kind of use Bitcoin and not the state. But those bridge services are important in the initial sort of adoption phase of Bitcoin, I think. Yeah. So it's a fine line,
especially for it to go more mainstream, which again will get people more in tune with Bitcoin. One of the things I'm excited about is even if regulation does move forward, at least with Bitcoin, there's more users have more of an ability to opt out and to still continue to stay under the radar. Do you all have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me the question is it a bomb? And regulations are bombs. They're things that are enforced against people against their will. They're backed up by the government and its war machine, whether it's local police or the military. Regulation is a threat. But the interesting thing about regulating Bitcoin is that the people trying to write those regulations really don't have any idea what it is. Mm-hmm. And so if they write these sorts of meaningless regulations, and then these sort of banks and large firms adopt those regulations and promote adoption, that's kind of a Trojan horse. Mm-hmm. Because that means that they're going to invite adoption, they're going to invite it to become commonplace, and then when people decide, well, I'm not complying anymore, it's like a expressway off of the crashing dollar. It's an off ramp, right? So I don't think they know what they're biting into.
That's great. I like the Trojan horse analogy.
Yeah, and I mean we like to use at Bitcoin Not Bombs a lot. Bitcoin is the honey badger of money. You can try to regulate it, but there's always going to be a large portion of the users who aren't going to play the regulation mm-hmm. game. And there's kind of been this talk that, we need regulation to legitimize Bitcoin, mm-hmm.
which
is kind of ridiculous because Bitcoin is being used every day. It's already a legitimate currency. It doesn't need the government saying it's a currency or anything like that. So yeah, I agree with Avi. I think it very much is a Trojan horse because they can't just regulate it a little bit. It never starts with I'm just going to, regulate it a little bit and it's just going to snowball. But at the same time, the people trying to regulate it really don't have a firm grasp of what it is. I mean, they're still using, dinosaur technology. And if you watch the financial services meeting that they had in New York, one of the women who was speaking there was trying to push this, gold-backed cryptocurrency that was all centralized, and that's a step backwards. That's a 20-year, going back in time kind of thing, and they don't really understand. They're trying to use this old, this old way of thinking about governance to deal with this idea that's so far beyond, their frame of mind about it. It's Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies and other just, ideas in crypto anarchy too. There are a lot of other projects being developed that are just so far ahead of, I think, what the legislators are even able to comprehend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're having trouble catching up with the understanding of it as a whole. So another thing that Bitcoin Not Bombs focuses on is encouraging social entrepreneurs and philanthropists to use Bitcoin in their philanthropic and nonprofit activities. Can y'all tell us about some of the organizations that are adopting it, and also talk about why Bitcoin is beneficial for nonprofits or philanthropists?
People that are adopting, I think one of the most exciting things I saw recently was SPCA. It's a huge animal rescue outfit. One of their chapters in British Columbia, one of the employees there was able to sneak the Shopify feature on, and so their t-shirts are now for sale for Bitcoin. Nice. So we're starting to see large, what you could consider a very large charity organization.
Sure.
And that was sort of exciting because I think that was the first sort of animal rescue anything that started experimenting with Bitcoin. So in the charity space, we're seeing competition amongst charity groups. That's good. Competition in the charity space is good for everybody, and we're starting to see large mainstream charities sort of experiment and get on board. And I think more and more. And I'm not a fan of the Red Cross, but it's only a matter of time before they say we're not going to turn down this money. Mm-hmm. We're going to take this. If people want to give to Red Cross or UNICEF or whoever, those charities are going to take it because they want to be able to do things with that money and go help people. That's what they do, and they won't be able to deny that donation anymore.
Cool. One of the things that I'm the executive director of the Center for Natural Living, and we've been accepting Bitcoin for over a year. We've actually received like 145 or so Bitcoins in our little short career. And one thing that I think is exciting with Bitcoin in the nonprofit world is you have a public ledger for everyone to see, because nonprofits and philanthropy is all about transparency. It's not private for profit. We're not trying to hide anything. So I think it's pretty cool how you could have that public ledger so the whole world can come and examine your books and your Bitcoin transactions. Now, Bitcoin Not Bombs, you guys, in addition to promoting other nonprofits or philanthropists accepting Bitcoin, y'all actually did some philanthropy of your own. Davi, tell us about this Hoodie the Homeless project.
Oh, sure. This was the first year that we did this. I think that we're going to do it in the future, but it was sort of it was two things. It was first proving that Bitcoin was a good funding model for a crowdsourced charitable project, which was purchasing these hoodies that we distributed in San Francisco to the homeless. Mm-hmm. But it was also outreach about Bitcoin to the homeless to prove that, so this is one of the interesting things about charity in the Bitcoin space, is that we're really getting at the role of currency in systemic poverty, right? And so when we're talking about Bitcoin versus the dollar, it gives us an opportunity to talk about inflation's effect on lower income people, because fundamentally the sort of crimes of the inflation of the dollar system affect the lower class higher than the upper class. The upper class is all invested in the stock market, so they have these hedges against inflation, while the poor doesn't. So while the nation is talking about the minimum wage, which is sort of like missing the cart for the horse, we're talking about the dollar itself, and we're talking about how the use of the dollar and the participation in the dollar economy actually causes systemic poverty. And if you can incentivize or encourage those people to get off of the dollar and to move into a deflationary currency that is currently increasing in value, that is a road out of poverty. And so that was a big part of that outreach. So we're doing two things. We're doing what I think is the stronger benefit to homeless people, and that is giving them a road to make a living for themselves, to sort of get out of poverty itself. But we're also proving that Bitcoin is useful for charities. Like, we got international donations. Mm-hmm. Like, we weren't just sort of out like ringing a bell with a pot getting spare change from people at Walmart. Yeah. We're getting global participation in a project for a local purpose.
Cool.
Right? And so it's also proving that not participating in Bitcoin is just ignoring a revenue stream for charitable projects. Mm-hmm. Because there's plenty of payment systems that are going to assume the volatility risk for you if that's what you're worried about.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to hold the Bitcoin for a long period of time, that, like, obviously it is volatile, but the trend is to increase in value, and so you can get more bang for your buck, as it were. Bang for your bit.
How many hoodies did y'all pass out?
Do you remember the total?
324, 325.
Nice.
325, yeah.
That's great. So 325 homeless people, or a little bit more.
But it was also, there was a stone soup effect. Because we also passed out 300 toothbrushes. We also passed out about 1,000 lunches.
Nice.
Like as soon as people saw, socks. We passed out 300 pairs of socks.
Wow.
As soon as people saw what was going on, they said, "Well, we don't necessarily have Bitcoin, but we can throw into the pot, right?"
Cool.
And so,
That's
yeah,
great.
I mean, it's a very charitable community. So,
Yeah. Y'all are doing some great work. So in addition to encouraging the philanthropists to accept Bitcoin, in addition to doing your own philanthropy, y'all also have a really exciting blog that's got all sorts of great information. Megan, tell us about the blog and tell us a website that listeners can go check out y'all's work.
Bitcoin.bombs.com. I'm the editor of the blog. It's a good variety of content that we do. So, we have a writer, Chris SPCA, who focuses on the technical side of Bitcoin. Then, Davi's always working on various projects and contributing that. I kind of focus on, I've been doing a lot on Sean's Outpost and the homeless outreach and kind of the problems we've been facing in Pensacola in regard to, kind of fighting the city and the county on this ridiculous panhandling ordinance that's been enacted. But it's kind of interesting. We've been seeing some pushback from that because it's finally getting national attention. But yeah, there's just a good variety of information on there, different charities. One of my favorite interviews I did was with Angelique Keaton of antiwar.com. And the great thing about Bitcoin for an organization like antiwar.com is it is semi-anonymous. You do have the public ledger. You can look up, where all the money is going for, any given charity if you can match up an address. But it's still semi-anonymous. And when it was revealed that the NSA was spying on them and wanting donor information, a lot of people backed out. So Bitcoin kind of helped antiwar.com gain more support. Donors felt safer using Bitcoin as opposed to dollars. And I think it's great for any organization that is controversial and subversive, because if you have a government that says I'm going to freeze donations to WikiLeaks or antiwar.com or any of these other organizations, that's really dangerous because they're an invaluable source to the community and to the entire country as far as information. So I think that's a really fascinating part of Bitcoin. It completely goes around that. You don't need to, go through the whole government permission thing or have to worry about being shut down.
Right on. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us. Again, the website is bitcoin.bombs.com. They're doing a lot of great work. Thanks, guys. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Peace, not dollars. Bitcoin, not bombs.
And now, SovereignBTC presents your Bitcoin Quote of the Week.
For this week's Quote of the Week, we're doing something a little bit different. Many people in the Bitcoin community are familiar with the ongoing problems of the Mt. Gox Bitcoin exchange, which I believe was the very first Bitcoin exchange out there, so kudos to them for that. But over the years, the price of Bitcoin through Mt. Gox has become rather inflated, and many people believe it is, for a while, it was no longer a good indicator of the true value of Bitcoin. They had a lot of problems getting dollars out, and Bitcoin sometimes, to their customers, and this created there were some liquidity issues. People couldn't get their dollars out, so instead they just turned around and bought more Bitcoins, and the price of Bitcoin went through the roof. There's all sorts of factors that led to this terrible indicator of what Bitcoin is worth. And just this week, they released a memorandum saying that they're halting the withdrawals, which to my understanding was pretty much already taking place. But this time they said they're doing it because of a problem with Bitcoin known as transaction malleability. Now, this is something that's been documented on a Bitcoin wiki since 2011, and Mt. Gox's CEO, Max Karpels, is saying that this is all of a sudden a big issue, even though he is the owner of the wiki that documented transaction malleability. Essentially, it's a supposed bug in the Bitcoin system that would allow people to take Bitcoins from other people. Now, a lot of people in the Bitcoin community are up in arms about this, not very happy about it, because they believe this problem was well known, and they think it's kind of a cop-out on Mt. Gox's side to, kind of cover up these problems that they were having that was stemming from other reasons. And they put this big press release out there, this big memorandum saying that there's a bug in the Bitcoin software. It caused all sorts of other problems within the Bitcoin community. Of course, the mainstream media picked up on it and had a field day with it because they like to bash Bitcoin all they can. And what we're going to do for our quote of the day this week is read some quotes from some other folks in the Bitcoin community that essentially thought Max Karpel's memorandum was a bunch of hogwash. So we're going to read some quotes from some leading Bitcoin experts and institutions on what they feel about Max Karpel's and the transaction malleability problem. We're going to start with blockchain.info, the world's biggest Bitcoin wallet. They said, the well-known and documented issue of transaction malleability makes it dangerous for Bitcoin wallets and Bitcoin exchanges to rely on the transaction hash as an authoritative proof or receipt for a transaction. Instead, best practices dictate that implementation of Bitcoin verified transactions by checking whether their inputs have been spent by any transactions included in a mined block, rather than relying on the presence or absence of the transaction hash in the blockchain. So they take the extra step of going to see all of the previous inputs to ensure that that money is actually in the wallet that it's supposed to be in. And that was from blockchain.info. Coinbase also issued something similar. After conducting a review of our wallet software, we could not find any instances of such an attack being used. We also looked into the technical details of the transaction malleability issue and just this morning added additional security measures to our software to further prevent such an attack. The Bitcoin Foundation even got involved, saying transaction malleability has been known about since 2011. In simplest terms, it is a small window where transaction IDs can be renamed before being confirmed in a blockchain. This is something that cannot be corrected overnight. Therefore, any company dealing with Bitcoin transactions and have coded their own wallet software should responsibly prepare for this possibility and include in their software a way to validate transaction IDs. Otherwise, it can result in Bitcoin loss and headache for everyone involved. Now, someone who's highly regarded in the Bitcoin community wasn't as nice in his delivery of his assessment of this Mt. Gox issue. This is Andreas Antonopoulos. He said on Twitter, unanticipated bugs don't come with year-old wiki pages fully documenting them. Gox is full of beep. So this week's Bitcoin quote of the week has been about Mt. Gox and their supposed transaction malleability issue. It sounds like a lot of the other exchanges were able to overcome this issue by simply implementing further security measures. Now, as a result of Mt. Gox essentially crashing and releasing what many people believe to be this bogus issue here, there's been a lot of different Bitcoin publications and exchanges that have dropped Mt. Gox from their pricing. Walltame.info dropped it. CoinDesk dropped it from their Bitcoin price. eToro, CryptoCoin Charts, and a whole other slew of really reputable Bitcoin institutions are essentially ostracizing Mt. Gox. So there you have it, folks. That was this week's Bitcoin Quote of the Week. This is the SovereignBTC podcast number 3. You can hear us on the Let's Talk Bitcoin podcast network. Check us out at letstalkbitcoin.com. We are really excited about Bitcoin, and one of the things that I think people can do to grow Bitcoin the most is to talk with the local businesses that they frequent about accepting Bitcoin. What better way to grow the Bitcoin ecosystem than to get more businesses using and accepting Bitcoin? Some of them are even willing to pay their employees and their contract labor with Bitcoin. I think that's pretty exciting. I think there's a lot of people out there that are holding on to Bitcoin as an investment asset, and that's cool. I'm totally down with that. We have some Bitcoin that we're holding on to as well. But again, I think the best way, if you really want to get it out there, and for those of you who are holding it as an investment, this is a way to actually raise the value, to grow the value of those Bitcoins you're holding as an investment. Use it, spend it. Frequent the local businesses that are accepting Bitcoin in your area. If you want to know about the businesses accepting Bitcoin, check out coinmap.org. Coinmap.org is a wonderful tool. It utilizes MapQuest, and it's an interactive map. You can see who's accepting Bitcoin and Litecoin in your area. If you live in a town or a city where no one's accepting Bitcoin, then start talking to the local businesses. Start with techie businesses, smaller businesses, alternative type businesses, health food stores, Computer repair shops is a perfect and natural start to accept Bitcoin, and let them know not only will they get the benefit of low transaction fees, the ability to sell stuff online across the world, but they'll also get a little bit of a publicity boost as well, especially if they happen to be the first business in the area accepting Bitcoin. Now, our featured interview this week is with Stephen Wilkinson. He's with AustinBitcoin.com. He is also one of the organizers of the upcoming Texas Bitcoin Conference, and he's with the Texas Bitcoin Association. And he just so happens to be the Texas BitPay integrator. So he's doing a lot of great work to get businesses in Central Texas and the entire state of Texas set up with Bitcoin through BitPay. We chat about the benefits of BitPay, how a business can get set up with BitPay, and why Bitcoin is so beneficial for not only the consumers but the merchants as well. So if you're a small business owner or merchant, you're definitely not going to want to miss this interview. But if you're just your average Bitcoin enthusiast and proponent, I encourage you to check this interview out, take it to heart, pick up on some of the talking points. And again, when you go out to your local diner, you go out to your video shop, whenever you go to your electronics store, use these talking points to try to encourage these business owners to accept Bitcoin. It doesn't take much. Take your little flyer or two, direct them to weusecoins.com if they haven't heard about Bitcoin. But chances are most people heard about it because there's been such a buzz. Again, utilize the tips and tools that we mentioned in this interview, and you do your part to grow the Bitcoin ecosystem. Here's our interview with Stephen Wilkinson on BitPay. So, Stephen, why don't you start by telling us how you got involved with the Bitcoin ecosystem?
Thanks, John. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you on this. And let's see, it was back in early 2011. I was just, fumbling around on the internet, just kind of exploring different things I could use. My brand new computer I just built with some really high-end video cards, and found that there's a way that you could mine this thing called Bitcoin with your video card, and you could trade it out for dollars, and essentially the video card would pay for itself. So I thought that was kind of cool, and just kind of dove a little bit further into it and found out, wow, this is a system that's completely decentralized, so there's no centralized authority, doesn't go through a government, doesn't go through a bank, doesn't go through an institution, doesn't have a company behind it. Wow, this kind of seems like it's minimized its corruption risk. And so I just jumped on, full-fledged into it and just tried to, study as much as I possibly could. Started experimenting with different mining programs and different way of thinking about this new technology as it's come out, because it really is a revolutionary technology.
Right on. Yeah, I guess it'll be seen as the old days when you could mine Bitcoin with graphics cards and I guess CPUs even before then. You're into mining as well. So tell us, what role does mining play in the broader Bitcoin ecosystem? Why is mining so important to the whole system?
Yeah, you can kind of think of mining as literally the backbone of the Bitcoin technology. It does a lot of different things. One of them being it is the protection mechanism of all the transaction as well as the entire protocol. So the more miners that are participating within the network, the stronger it is and the more protection the users actually have. So it's kind of a win-win basis here. A miner also works with the protocol to institute the new Bitcoins into the economy at a prescribed rate. So we know exactly how many are coming out. And right now, there's 25 that come out approximately every 10 minutes. It's a little bit faster right now because the network is growing so fast and at almost an exponential rate right now, how fast it's growing. So it's a little faster than the 10 minutes. But right now, 25 Bitcoins come out or literally released into the network on a 10-minute basis here. So it's kind of maintains the monetary system as opposed to like the Federal Reserve System that's monetized at $85 billion a month.
Yeah, the quantitative easing, they're just shelling it out. In addition to mining, you're also the Texas BitPay integrator, and you encourage local businesses here in Austin and across the state to utilize Bitcoin in order to more efficiently and more affordably process their transactions. Why don't you start by telling us, let's assume there's some business owners that are listening to the program right now. Why is Bitcoin a valuable resource for a small or large business?
Sure. At Austin Bitcoin, started that first of 2013, and we partnered in with BitPay, which is the world's largest payment processor for Bitcoin. They do some wonderful services for merchants. They allow them to accept Bitcoin without even having to know what the Bitcoin is. They just know it's another form of payment. So think of it just like, there's Visa, there's MasterCard, there's American Express. Well, now there's Bitcoin. Wonderful thing about Bitcoin, though, it works very similar to cash. You can take it online just as if you were in person, had somebody handing you cash. And then you can have absolute confidence that cash is not counterfeited, which is something that's very, very different than, the traditional cash sense, because some business owners have to get a pin out to make sure that $100 bill is good.
Mm-hmm.
With Bitcoin, you have 100% accuracy that it is going to be good. You can accept it just like an email. BitPay will process that transaction for you, lock in the price at a exchange rate that is locked in at a real-time basis, so you're guaranteed the amount of dollars you'll be getting for that transaction. Then BitPay takes that, Bitcoins, converts it to dollars, and deposits that into your bank account next business day. Works the same way credit cards do, except you don't have to worry about the fraud risk and chargebacks, as well as BitPay services starts at a 1% conversion fee and then goes down from there.
Wow.
If you have any substantial volume, because we are a very loyal community of people that use Bitcoin. If you get any substantial volume, we're talking $3,000 a month, you'll go to a flat rate. And you can do unlimited transactions for one flat rate per month. And there's no additional fees, there's no additional monthly charges, there's no hidden things. It's literally almost too good to be true, but when you look at it all together, it's essentially the holy grail of payment systems. It's back to, being able to do that deal with the handshake, and it gets it, where we can have it with local people are able to keep money here as opposed to sending it to banks in other states and other countries.
That's right. Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that aspect of BitPay where you can convert the Bitcoin immediately to dollars. Most of the business owners I talk to seem a little standoffish about utilizing Bitcoin because they're aware of the volatile nature of the value of Bitcoin. But it sounds like BitPay can help overcome that objection. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. That is definitely, something that people are very concerned with. And, the price fluctuations occurring in the market, you would hate to accept a payment, and during that transaction, you lose money. That's a horrible thing. You would not want to institute that. But BitPay completely shields the business from that particular issue. Once the customer is ready to check out, the business owner would take the amount they're owed, including any sales tax or any other applicable fees, take that amount owed, put it into BitPay's system. It'll do a real-time spot price of what Bitcoin's trading with and lock that price in for 15 minutes to allow that customer to process the order. Once that order is processed, that order is then converted into dollars and then deposited into the business's bank account minus any potential fees. So like I said earlier with the 1% starter fee during that transaction, 1% would be removed and the remaining would be deposited. Now, if a business owner wants to maybe start getting a little bit of Bitcoin, starting to maybe try to experiment, you can actually settle out with BitPay services at whatever percentage you would like. So you could have 100% in the dollars, or you could have 50% in dollars, 50% retained in Bitcoin. So there's opportunity for them to, be able to obtain some of this Bitcoin by selling their goods and services.
Right on. Now, I still think this is going to be confusing for most people that haven't used Bitcoin. Walk us through what exactly a Bitcoin transaction using BitPay at a local merchant would look like. Let's say I'm coming into Steven's Pizza Shop to buy some pizza. You have BitPay set up. I have a Bitcoin wallet on my Android phone. What would that look like?
Literally, you'd come up, you'd order your pizza. We'd complete the entire transaction. We'd have a amount owed. So here I am saying you owe me, let's say for this example, it's $20. Okay, well, you could hand me a $20 bill and we'd be square. It'd be all good. Or I could just say, I'd like to pay with Bitcoin. Well, the merchant themselves would just enter, the customer wants to check out with Bitcoin. They would press a checkout button. Right then and there, the BitPay service would instantaneously pull a real-time conversion rate of what Bitcoin trades to $20 and then offer the customer a QR code to scan with their smartphone with the amount owed, that's the converted amount from the $20 or whatever $20 was worth at that time in Bitcoin. The customer would scan that code and hit send, and just like an email, it would have instant confirmation. The merchant would see that, hey, I've got my payment, and they're rest assured that they're going to have $20 minus any potential fees into their bank account next business day. So it's completely seamless. They don't really need to even worry about Bitcoin, what it's trading about, or even that it's, what it's doing. As long as that customer has some, they know that they're going to get dollars in their account.
That's great. Yeah, I've always told people when you use a system like BitPay, the actual value of Bitcoin is largely irrelevant. Whether one Bitcoin's worth $10,000 or worth $50, you can still just transfer a different amount of Bitcoin to that person. So does the BitPay system integrate with existing point-of-sale systems? And if it doesn't, how would a merchant get around that?
We are BitPay kind of went after the lower-hanging fruit of online sales, so they have the largest pain points when it comes to credit card processing because the credit card's not present. When it comes down to an actual retail merchant, we do have some point-of-sale systems that we're in beta phase right now. One of them is Soft Touch out of Florida. That's kind of built for the bar and restaurant industry. And we're also working together with a Windows-based system that will allow integration into a majority of the POS systems that are in the market currently. And that's still kind of in the beta phase, so we're still trying to test it out to make sure it's almost bulletproof before we would actually put it into the marketplace. Because the last thing we want to do is have a business be down or have any slowdown in their business, because the bottom line is key here.
Right on. And even outside of using an existing point of sale system, you can still just manually enter the price from your current point of sale system in a tablet or something like that, right?
Oh, absolutely. If you're using just a standard credit card terminal where you ring somebody up on a cash register, you have a paper receipt and they owe, X number of dollars, you can go right over to a tablet or a smartphone and utilize BitPay's service through a website. It's literally a web link you would just bookmark on whatever device that's agnostic of device. That would pull up the web page, offer that QR code, and the customer checks out and you go on to the next customer. So it'd be very, very fast.
That's great. You have an interesting story about a dentist office that recently got signed up with BitPay to accept Bitcoin, and you said some of the employees were a little bit nervous about coming to a training. Tell us how that ended up playing out.
Yeah, we just signed up Vista Ridge Family Dentistry there up in Cedar Park, and great group of folks up there. And when I first got into the office, kind of asked them, kind of what was their typical process, and one of the ladies behind the counter was showing me that they've got to go to this one screen, enter a password that comes to another screen, that they'd have to enter their credit card information, and it was this whole minutia of just extra steps and information. You had to make sure everything was perfect for the actual process. I was thinking, they are going to be so surprised with this thing on Bitcoin. And it was there was some skepticism at first, thinking that, this can't be any easier than the credit cards. But as I just showed them, I go, here's the link. You'll just click the link. You put the customer name that you're wanting to take the payment from right in this blank. You'll put the amount owed. We'll click this button. It pulls up the QR code. The customer scans, and you're done.
Nice.
It's that simple.
Easy as
and
that.
It was literally they had to double. They were like, "Whoa, wait a minute! It's that easy? This is actually kind of awesome." And it's some enthusiasm that kind of came into the room. It's like, hey, you know what? This is not some arcane. This is something that's going to make our lives easier. So it's really, really great to see people finally, that light bulb kind of click off in their head that, wow, this is really something that's going to change things.
Right on. All right, just got a couple more questions for you. You work with Austin Bitcoin, and you guys seem to be signing up quite a few local businesses in the Austin, Texas area. Tell us about some of the businesses you've signed up, and how easy does that come by? Did these businesses, sounds like, you tell a pretty convincing tale. It sounds like the technology speaks for itself. What's it like when you're pitching these businesses on accepting Bitcoin?
Well, I founded Austin Bitcoin back in February of 2013, which in Bitcoin time, that was ages ago. I would approach businesses and they'd heard about the technology, but I was typically the first one that ever came in talking about it. Our first business we signed up was Capital Coin and Bullion there off Burnett Road, and they were enthusiastic about it. They were like, wow, an electronic system we can actually sell gold and silver with, because we can't take a credit card, because the minute somebody walks out the door, we have chargeback risk. And they just, no business can really, sustain, that type of risk. So taking Bitcoin was just a no-brainer for them. I signed up a few other little places, a hair salon here, got a food truck down in the Rain Street area. But then within the last 3 or 4 months, I've just been inundated with different people trying to say, hey, I need to find out more information, or I want to start signing up now. And now I've got a few food trailers. We've got, a couple of dentist offices. We've got even a little grocery store that's up in Leander that's now accepting, that I've heard that had a tremendous amount of people come into their store just because they are accepting Bitcoin.
Awesome.
And it's really great to see this type of, fierce loyalty within our community. But it's, it's very similar to what Austin already experiences with its local economy. And I think that's what Bitcoin really is going to share with Austin, is it's going to keep that local economy strong, as well as keep the money here in this local economy, which is really what matters.
On the last episode of Sovereign BTC, I went ahead and declared Austin, Texas, the Bitcoin capital of the world. Do you agree with that assessment, Stephen?
I would say we're pretty close. We're definitely on our way, especially with our Bitcoin conference. We're going to have kickoff March 5th and 6th of this year.
Right on. Excellent. So let's say there's a business owner listening and they're interested in signing up for BitPay. Where do they go and what do they do?
They could go to our website, austinbitcoin.com. If you have questions or whatnot, you can fill out our little contact us form, and then we'll get back in touch with you and actually come on site and explain what we could do, kind of work through your process and make it as easy as possible for the business owner. If they want to just, hit the ground running and go ahead and sign up, they can, right there on austinbitcoin.com, you can click the BitPay link. That'll take them directly to the sign up page with BitPay services. And literally, they could be up and accepting Bitcoin within about 20 minutes. It
Awesome.
takes just 2 confirmation emails and just a little bit of information about the business, which is, just typical of, any institution that handles financial transactions. I mean, it'd be very similar if you were, the same information is required that you would if you were setting up a standard bank account.
Right on.
So, it'd be very simple, and they'd be accepting Bitcoin instantly. I even had a Girl Scout mom help her daughter out by accepting Bitcoin through their phone, because they were getting charged 2.75% per transaction with their Square account. But I've got them set up with a BitPay account, and now they're paying 1%. And with this last push of Girl Scout cookies, I think they did the $30 flat rate, and they're doing unlimited transactions with no fees.
Nice.
And it's a game changer.
Nice. My favorite flavor is Bitcoin Mint. So before we let you go, tell us one more time about that Texas Bitcoin conference coming up in March.
Yeah, we've got a grassroots organization that's kind of formed out of the local meetup, the Bitcoin meetup that we have actually every Sunday at Shoals Garden at 7 p.m. There at 19th and San Jacinto. But kind of the organizers that formed this meetup, we formed the Texas Bitcoin Association, and we're wanting to do the largest Bitcoin conference that is done to date. Being here in Texas, we've got to go big. So we've set up the Circuit of the Americas venue to hold our event. We're going to have a wonderful array of speakers and panelists be able to come in and talk about the technology from a number of different perspectives, from the developer side to the economic and regulatory side, and even into the merchant side. We're going to have merchant workshops. We're going to have tutorials. I mean, literally, you could come in not knowing anything about Bitcoin and walk away being an expert in it. This is literally what we're trying to set up here, as we are going to try to drive this technology into, not just Central Texas and Texas, but really this entire America's region. This is a worldwide phenomenon, and we are able to utilize the wonderful nature of people coming together and doing good things. So it's gonna be taking place March 5th and 6th at the Circuit of the Americas, and people can find out more information at texasbitcoinconference.com. And one last thing, we're going to actually have the world's first Bitcoin funded concert that will be our ending note of our conference. It'll take place at 8:30 on the 6th. So it's going to be the first concert ever funded completely with ticket sales by Bitcoin, and 100% of those sales are going to go to the charity Free Aid. So it's really great that we're getting to work with some great folks and do some good things with this new technology.
Right on. Well, thanks for joining us, and thanks for all the work you do to spread the value of Bitcoin.
You're welcome. And just let me know. Just contact me through awesomebitcoin.com. I'd be happy to help anybody.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That was yet another edition of Sovereign BTC, your guide to the practical side of everyday Bitcoin use. I want to thank you for listening. You can check us out at SovereignBTC.com or at Let'sTalkBitcoin.com. We're on Facebook at Facebook.com/SovereignBTC. You can find us on Twitter at Twitter.com/SovBTC. As I said, we recorded a bunch of this podcast at Freedom Summit 2014. The lovely Ernest Hancock helped to organize this event, his lovely wife Donna. Check their stuff out at freedomsphoenix.com. And we're going to be bringing you some more interviews that I recorded from this event next week. Next week, we're going to be broadcasting and recording from Liberty Forum 2014. That takes place February 20th through the 23rd. At Liberty Forum 2013, I had the pleasure of mingling and learning from a lot of big Bitcoin enthusiasts like Eric Voorhees and Roger Ver. And as you heard on our last podcast from Jeffrey Tucker, that's actually where he was totally turned on to Bitcoin, and now he's one of the biggest Bitcoin proponents out there. So if you're in the New Hampshire, Northeast area, if you want to fly on over there to Liberty Forum, definitely do that. It's taking place in Nashua, New Hampshire. They're still selling tickets, so you still have an opportunity to check that out. We'll be bringing you even more exciting interviews live from Liberty Forum. And again, next week we'll have some more interviews from Freedom Summit 2014. We hope you enjoyed the program. Don't forget, folks, Bitcoin will help you to live free and prosper.